Good evening, my friends. What a long week it has been. I do appreciate your waiting. But now I am back. So please, gather round. Grab your drinks, bite to eat, and settle in by the fire. For tonight, I have quite the tale to tell. Are you ready? Good. Then let us begin. Before we get started with tonight's story, I want to let you all know that I apologize for my past couple of weeks' absence. I've been working on a story that has an actual video and photographic proof to go along with it, but since I started writing that story a couple of weeks ago, there have been a lot of updates between the person that I've been working with and the story as it has been unfolding on the grander scheme of things. For those of you watching the news lately, I'm sure you can guess which creature of creepypasta level fame this involves, and since this is going to be a video to watch rather than just listen to, I've wanted to take my time with it. Since I started that, I've been a bit worn down from other things going on in my life, and I am just now trying to get back into the swing of things. I'll explain a bit more at the end of the video. For now, let's head back into the realm of the paranormal, with yours truly, with a little story I like to call Supernatural Supervisor. When I was a kid, I worked mostly on my papa's farm up until the summer of my junior year in high school. One day, shortly after I'd gotten my first vehicle, my father came into the kitchen and put a piece of paper in front of me, an application to work at the same company he did. Honestly, it was a nice change of pace considering most of my summers, and, well, a good portion of the rest of my school year, had revolved around growing of tobacco up until the then recent buyout. No more getting sunburned to a crisp in the fields. No more swatting off mosquitoes and gnats. And, most importantly, no more of my mother breathing down my neck over every little move. I was a bit nervous at first, but the office staff turned out to be pretty chill people, and they gave me leave to mostly do my work independently since it was a very simple task. I even had my own little workspace on top of the office. Literally. The actual company office was inside of a huge warehouse, and my spot was on the roof of that. The area itself was cordoned off by a wooden fence of sorts. 3/4 of the fence were lined with filing cabinets and old boxes of papers, and the final quarter, near the only entrance, a solitary flight of stairs, had various chunk parts here and there. The lower part of the floor, jutting out from the office, was actually framed by a high chain-link fence, with a desk where tools could be checked out and returned. With the only exit being through the office door, or a literal flying leap over the side of my station, there wasn't any worries about much of anybody coming to bother me. Both the guys that ran the desk and my boss were huge guys, and the file team consisted of a bunch of tough Appalachian grandmothers, so there wasn't a single person outside of the team getting anywhere around where this little teenage girl was. Even my father only came to my work area once, and even then he was followed by my boss because of the confidentiality surrounding the financial reports and such that were stored there. I say this for 2 reasons. Number 1, those people I worked with were awesome and deserved to be mentioned even under the mask of anonymity. And number 2, I could count the number of people who were allowed to be in that area on both hands. This latter part meant that I learned everyone who was allowed in that little area by the first day. You'll see why this is important very quickly. My job was to reorganize all of the file cabinets, put new reports into corresponding folders, and make new folders whenever I came across new material without a home, or found a file jacket that had a bit of wear and tear going on. I would be buzzed into the office early each morning, say hello to everyone, grab a box of reports and blank jackets, and then head up to my work. It was a simple space, with a large up-ended box as my desk, a foldable steel chair for my seat, and 2 fans, one large box fan beside me, and a giant round oscillating fan at the other end of the room to provide air circulation. Every few hours, I would go get another box of reports and take them back upstairs with me. With the occasional check-ins from one of the office staff, less to see how the reports were coming along and more to make sure I didn't pass out from the heat inside the warehouse, and the y'all all right up there from the desk guys, I was pretty much left to my own devices. My days working there were mostly peaceful, spent listening to the din of the warehouse guys going on about their days. Because the cabinets were so tall and the noise inside the building spread out so much, I was practically hidden in my little work area. On occasion, if I wanted to take a short break, I could sneak over to the railing and peek through the space between the cabinets, or go peer out from near the stairs opening to watch people. And at a certain point in the day, the warehouse would be mostly quiet, save for the huge industrial ceiling fans and my own 2 smaller ones whirring about. So it was about as peaceful as you can imagine. You can also imagine my surprise when I started getting glimpses of a guy coming up the stairs I had never seen before. The first time, I was looking through some papers in a box I had propped up in another folding chair. Over the top of the chair, I noticed the top and bill of a faded red and white baseball cap coming up the stairs. It had mesh going part of the way around the back and was streaked with bright orangish-brown of dry, dusty dirt, usually the sort of thing you might see on a local farmer's hand. Which was the very sort of thing that nobody in that area would have been wearing. And for starters, while there wasn't much of a dress code, the office staff all wore professional clothes, and most everyone else in the area had to wear a safety helmet once they came on shift. So no, nobody should have been wearing a dirty cap like that. Once this little factoid hit the right thought receptors in my brain, I immediately snapped my head up to look to see who was coming up the stairs. Only, as I looked up, he vanished. I just kind of blinked and shook my head. I knew what I saw, but it clearly wasn't there anymore. I got up and walked over to the stairs, even walked partly down them to peer around the floor. The only people around was the guy running the desk and the few guys milling around at the end of the warehouse looking for such and such bundle of lumber. The guy at the desk also had his back to me and was calmly bobbing his head in time to the Tom Petty song playing over the little radio they kept by the checkout station. So, quite obviously, he wasn't acting like he would if someone else had come into the area. For a moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, that the owner, and thus the only guy who could get away dressing with however he wanted in that area, had come for a visit and had stepped into the single-stall men's bathroom there. But no, that door was wide open as I walked past and no one was inside. Puzzled, I walked into the office, but there was only the office staff there. Figuring that maybe the heat was getting to me. It really was nowhere near as hot as working out in the field, but I couldn't rule it out since no one else seemed to be acting like we had a visitor. I just grabbed a new box of work and went back up the stairs. After all, even though you couldn't always hear somebody until they were close to the top of the stairs, just the process of a person walking up them gave off enough vibrations to where you could feel it on the floor. And that hadn't happened in this case. In fact, I might have written the whole thing off entirely if it hadn't happened again. On several more occasions over the next 2 weeks, I would occasionally see the cap bobbing up the stairs, or even 2 thin legs as they headed up the flight. Yet, same as before, every single time I looked up at whoever it was, they were gone. I guess it was around that time that I started to suspect it was a ghost, or some sort of guardian angel. As you have already heard from previous stories, the video, History of an Appalachian Narrator and Coveralls, is a good one if you newcomers need a place to start. You should know by this point in my life, I was no stranger to witnessing odd things like this. It was just natural in my area. I didn't mention it, however, on the offhand chance that my mother would hear about it and make me quit out of concern it was some guy lurking about. I didn't want the gate guys to have to do an investigation and possibly get into trouble because I mentioned some guy was lurking about there. Especially when said guy very obviously disappeared from sight the moment you looked at him. I had enough problems at the time of having to be on this awful cabbage soup diet because my mother wanted me to be thinner for upcoming senior photos, and there was no way I was going to have to deal with both that and have those few hours of peace taken away from me until I went back to school. So, since the ghost wasn't doing anything to me, I didn't do anything to him. But I did notice he started getting a little closer to the top of the stairs every day. Then, on my last week, I thought, what would he do if I didn't look right at him until he got to the top of the stairs? So, one day, after trying to slog down a canister of that awful cabbage soup and failing, the tomato juice mixed with the broth just did not settle well in my stomach when it was so hot. I chugged down half my water bottle, crossed my arms over top of my desk, and decided to take a little nap in place of lunch. About 10 minutes before the alarm was set to go off on my wristwatch, I noticed, out of the corner of my eye, someone was ascending the stairs. It was that same red and white cap. I couldn't get all the details because of the way my glasses were smushed up onto my face from where I was resting my head on my crossed arms, but more details became fairly obvious. I couldn't quite make out the face, but the skin was quite tanned and seemed to be a lot less wrinkly than I thought it would be. The jawline was fairly sharp, with a bit of dark stubble around it, which gave way to a thin neck that ended in a work shirt. And beneath that came a pair of equally skinny legs clad in work pants, and finally, a pair of work boots. I watched the figure ascend, and for the first time since I had begun seeing it, I reached the top step. It stopped for a few seconds. The legs didn't move, but I could feel eyes on me. After a few moments, the legs shifted, moving again to cross in front of the large oscillating fan. Then, I saw the legs slightly lean, with one leg crossing haughtily in front of the other, the way you would expect a guy trying to appear suave and nonchalant would do as he leaned up against the wall. In this case, even though I could not make out anything from about the thighs upwards, I suspected whoever it was had perhaps crossed his arms atop the topmost banister post and was leaning against it. And he was just watching me. The strangest part about it was that where I felt no vibrations in the floor whenever this guy, ghost, whatever walked up them, I could distinctly feel that the air pouring out of the fan was blocked by something very obviously standing in front of it. Less creepy was that I did not feel the slightest creeped out by this. I did, however, start to feel very annoyed after a little bit. Why was this guy watching me? And did he really have to hog the air like that? Yeah, I'm not really sure whether I was just so used to witnessing strange things, or if it was just youthful naivete or what. But I was more concerned with him blocking half my only air conditioning instead of being worried that maybe this was a dangerous person. But what can I say? I could clearly see down to the stitches on this guy's boots, the slight fraying at the cuffs of his pants, and the thin tendrils of what had once been light-colored mud dried on both. They were very solid, and I was very clearly seeing exactly what they looked like, and most of what they had been attached to on their way up to my workspace. He wasn't moving, he was just cooling off, I suppose? Or, most likely, he realized my little deception of trying to get him to do something besides walk upstairs, and figured I would eventually look up to see what was blocking the fan. But I didn't move. I sat there, head laid over, straining to keep watching the stranger's pant legs flutter a bit until my watch went off and I had to get back to work. So, if my supernatural supervisor really wanted me to look up at him, I figured I would grant him his wish. I began raising my head, and in the process, the dark olive of the fabric of his pants suddenly winked out of existence, leaving me, once again, alone with my work. Well, my friends, did you enjoy this story? If you did, be sure to like, subscribe, and share this video and its fellows with all your friends. And hit the notification bell too, so you can catch your latest spooky fix the moment it comes out. Just a few updates. This video has taken like a week or two to make because I have been sick on and off, still dealing with grief and schedule changes at work. I've been hoping to have some more videos up soon, including that Momo one, but I have had zero energy to do anything lately. And that's slowly coming back, but I'm fighting to get there. So, I'm hoping my voice didn't sound too tired of this. Anyway, thank you all so much, and I'll see you all real soon. 1. Those people I work with were awesome and deserve to be mentioned under the mask of anonymity. Under the mask of anonymity. Under the mask of anonymity. 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 Anemone.